tell us.
Grab the microphone there.
Grab the mic and just put it somewhere.
I think the first, let me just get through this and then I'll let anyone else speak, but I've been thinking and taking some notes. But I would say bring dignity to Africans and Africa, and bring dignity to Livingstone's Christianity. Tell the story, this modern doctor meets an African doctor, not a teacher, but just here you have this modern man, went to NYU medical school, etc., living the high life in Manhattan, and he goes and he meets an African doctor, his colleague and counterpart, who is living a life that the African was inspired by this man, David Livingstone. This reminds me something of The Mission, or William Wilberforce, Amazing Grace, or Eric Liddell, Chariots of Fire. I wonder if Eric Liddell was a contemporary of William Wilberforce, and I wonder if Liddell, Wilberforce, and Livingstone were contemporaries. In the late 19th century, early 20th, there was a huge Edinburgh missionary conference, World Missions Conference. I wonder if any of them connected with that, especially Eric Liddell and David Livingstone, who are both Scottish. It would make sense that they probably went to this World Missions Conference in Edinburgh, because it sounds like right around those same years. And then in terms of just sort of your eventual website, etc., get someone like Billy Graham or Rick Warner or Gary Haugen, who is the president of the International Justice Mission, to tell a modern message, or like a Bono would be sort of your A-list guy to do it. Get Bono to talk about the dignity of Africans and Africa today. That's all I got right now.
They're wonderful people. Mm-hmm. Africans are such wonderful people.
Yeah.
And they've suffered so much. Mm-hmm. They're just great souls. You meet them and they're just so grateful and such wonderful, loving beings.
Yeah, I think the recent film Amazing Grace with William Wilberforce really does nail down a man who represented Christianity well, mm-hmm. and did significant things for society. The bit of controversy with David Livingstone is his motto was Christianity, commerce, and civilization, and some people would say, well, right. Was he really good for Africa?
Right.
What if he never went there? And what if the white man never walked across the continent of Africa? Where would Africa be today? Mm-hmm. But in a positive way, mm-hmm. as a missionary doctor, I think if you could bring dignity to Africa and Africans and to his Christianity that inspired him, mm-hmm. Coming from a lot of Scottish pietism, mm-hmm. that would be cool.
Yeah, that's right. Pass the mic down to that gentleman down there.
That should be good.
Is that good? Yeah, as long as it's within a few feet of you, it's okay.
Okay. Just speaking on behalf of my generation, I think there's this big movement in what is being called postmodern film, and I think what's so cool about it is it's a lot of realism, and I think I'll be bold for a minute because I'll probably never get to talk to people making a feature film again.
Why? We're not going to get to come back?
What's that? Yeah. Well, I think it could very easily just be another inspirational story, and that's it. Like it doesn't sound. I've heard
the modern day one. You mean?
Yeah, it's just Amazing Grace. It's Chariots of Fire. That's inspirational, but you haven't left me with a reason to do something about it. Mm-hmm. I'm inspired, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And so my feeling is something that's so important is the rhetoric of realism. This guy Livingstone show his reality. He's a Christian, but Christians are flawed, and that's reality.
Yeah, he was flawed. By the way.
And if he wasn't flawed, then he doesn't need Christ. If he doesn't need Christ, then why the heck is he a Christian?
Right.
So show his humanity. I think that's so important, and show that he's overwhelmed. He's one man trying to do it. And if you want to give a Christian theme to it, give it the gospel message. The gospel message is Jesus leaving people with a task, and it's totally unresolved. And still today it's unresolved. And it's up to us as a community of people to move on that. If you look at the Gospel of Mark, as scholars argue, the actual ending is Jesus tells these women to go tell people what's going on. Mary, he tells them to go spread the word, but they leave in fear and don't say a word. And that's the end. And I think there's amazing rhetoric in that, as it's unresolved. So what are you going to do about it? And it's a bold thing now in film to leave there's no resolution to the ending, and people are afraid of that because you don't leave the theater feeling all la-di-da. You leave heartbroken. But I think that's if you want to move people, then move them.
Like Kevin Kline recently in the
Get
film.
the mic.
Nope. Maybe I would say an example would be the recent movie Trade, and I think next week it's more of a documentary that's coming out called Call and Response, and about human trafficking also. And the film Lionsgate I think it was Lionsgate that did Trade. About human trafficking. Kevin Kline was the main star in that kind of film of like you leave there. There's a European film called Lilia Forever that we've shown a few times on campus, and it's kind of a more raw view on the issue of human trafficking. And we've shown that on campus, and you walk out of there just sort of like speechless, and you're like I can't believe this is happening. What can I do about it? So maybe that would speak to what you're saying, Alex.
Okay. Everything Alex said, I completely agree with, and I think that's definitely a huge point. And this is the first time I've ever heard of Livingstone. But honestly, like if I were to read his journals or read his books or something about it, I am almost positive by what you guys have told me that the reason he went to Africa was because of the presence that Christ had in his life. And similar to what Alex said, this call, this like left unanswered, that is something that he obviously felt in his life and said, listen, in response to Christ, I'm going to go to Africa. And I think that's a huge part of the film. Because if that isn't a focus of the film, then I think Livingstone isn't being done justice what he did. Because if it's painted as this guy who went to Africa, did amazing things, but yet has no purpose, and Christ isn't the point of it, then there's no point at all, because that's not why he went there. He didn't go there to be a good person. He went there because he felt Christ and the call in his life. But on the other hand, I would say that is a definite point. But on the other hand, and as far as marketing, I think marketing to Christians and going into that is definite something that is that's a good goal. But also, I think on the flip side, it should be thinking of how can we make this universal. How can we make this film speak to Christians, but also speak to non-Christians? I look at a film, none of you guys worked on Facing for Giants, right? Okay, good. I hated it. And the reason I hated it, not because it wasn't a good movie, but the reason I hated it is because it was so marketed to Christians that any non-Christian, very few, I'm sure, would have been like, oh, I want to see it. No, it's not something that non-Christians would want to see. And I think that's the tricky part. The tricky part is trying to make Livingstone's life, this is a response to Christ, but also saying like, listen, you who are a Buddhist, you who are a Muslim, you who are an atheist, like you should see this film because it'll change your life. You'll like it.
We thought about that. We want to make it universal so that, because what it's about is about love for humanity.
Exactly.
And if you do that, you're doing what Jesus said.
Yep.
100%. So I like that. That's a very good suggestion. You pass the mic over.
I think for me, like, I think everyone so far has been talking about the message of the film, and I think they all have valid points, but for me, as an aspiring screenwriter, film studies major, I've been thinking about how to tell that message and how to get that message across. And I know for me, I'm really interested in the Livingstone story, in himself, and I think almost the modern time thing that you kind of, you have to do that in your film, obviously. I almost would like to see the character not so much even as a character, but as a device to tell Livingstone's story, where I'm not invested in this modern person's story, but I'm kind of side by side with them, and we're both being invested in Livingstone's story. Like, I'm almost not worrying about that story, but being able to put all of my emotional attention chips into Livingston.
That's where the power is.
Exactly, and have that person, the modern person, mirror how I'm feeling as we both hear about Livingstone, as we both discover his message and what he did.
Tell me, do you feel that a period piece of, I mean, if obviously we do our best to tell the story as well as possible and include all the things that we're talking about here about humanity, but do you think just subject matter, I mean, you open in the paper and you're seeing Livingstone, an African legend, that's our temporary title of the movie. Do you think that's going to draw young people at all?
I mean,
we think we might have a problem with that, getting people initially to go see a movie about a guy who lived in the 1800s that was a missionary.
and I think, talking about Amazing Grace, too, that's a film where you have that issue as well. But I would say, too, going along with what the message of the film is if it's an 1800s piece that happens to be about a guy doing missionary work, then you might lose some of that. But I think there's definitely...
Say that again.
If it's a movie about the 1800s that just so happens to be about a guy who does mission work, you may lose that younger audience. But I think there's a huge movement among youth and college kids for mission work, for looking at it not just about where I am, but where I am in the world, how I affect the world. So I think if you make a film about a man who's committed to Christ in mission work, and it just happens to be in the 1800s, then I think by flipping it that way, I really think that you'll get a large enough audience of young people who care about that it will spread, and that you could have a much larger audience, given even though that it is a period piece, that it is the subject matter.
My last trip back from Zambia, I happened to bump into a guy that knew a friend of mine. I said, well, what do you do? He's from L.A. I said, well, you're from L.A. too. You know, what, you know, friend? He said, he's a musician. I said, well, who are you? He says, oh, I'm here. Well, I'm with my church. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, our whole church went over there to do mission work. And I'm seeing, and I was on a flight to Thailand, and I was sitting with a bunch of kids, and they were all wearing these brown shirts. And I said, where are you guys? They said, oh, we're going over to do service in Thailand. So many people now are taking their vacations. Instead of going laying drunk on the beach in Cancun somewhere, they're saying, you know what, let's go do something with our 2 weeks, and they're coming back much more satisfied, much happier from having spent their time that way. You know, so I know exactly what you're saying. A lot of young people are resonating on this vibration now, of wanting to help and wanting to be part of this.
And I think a lot of times that we young people get involved in that, but we kind of see it as we're the starting point. And I think showing that no, this has been going on for a long time. You doing this are part of a much bigger movement that's been going on for so much longer would really be interesting and appealing to younger people.
I mean, David Livingstone, he may have been, there was a huge UK student movement, missionary movement in the late 18th century into the 19th, 20th, early 20th century. So, I mean, I wonder if he had been a part of something like that. You know, I don't know. But there is this social justice in action. At Pepperdine, there's a program called SAGE, which is Social Justice in Action. And there's students who are just constantly going out and doing things, like some of the students you've met at the boys' home. So he's absolutely right. I think if you could dial in some of that activism. I mean, you watch a film like William Wilberforce, and there's this moment where the two main characters say, "Can we really do this? Can we flip this whole slavery issue?" Right. And the Prime Minister says to William Wilberforce, "You know, we're too young to know any different." And in Chariots of Fire, the sister is talking to Eric Little, and she's wanting him to go with the family to China, where their family had been missionaries, she says, she's encouraging him to go to China, and he says to her, God has made me for China, but He's also made me fast, and when I run, I feel His pleasure. Mm-hmm. Like, that's good writing, writer. That's, that's like, I saw that movie 10 years ago, or maybe longer.
Copy that line.
Here's that line.
It's still there, and I do think young people see that, they catch a phrase like that, and they're like, if he could have done it, the youngest member of parliament ever in the British Parliament, the youngest prime minister ever at that time, if they could do it, then young people are like, I can do it also. Mother Teresa saying, go find your Calcutta.
That's right.
I'm done.
Grab the mic.
Okay, I'm not very experienced in making movies or anything, but
That's right. You watch them, though, don't you?
yeah, I watch them.
Okay.
Exactly. And so what this kind of concept reminds me of is 3 movies. Secondhand Lions was kind of like the indie kind of message movie that I got, and from that I got the idea of like developing a mentorship between 2 characters maybe, and like just like if it took place in modern times, one character could be like another character's mentor, and they could retell him the story of Livingstone and kind of relate that into the movie. And The Butterfly, I think it was a Spanish movie. It wasn't in English. It wasn't made in America, but I really liked it, and it left me inspired, and it kind of had the ending. So I don't know, you could watch it or something, but you have to watch it with subtitles because it's not in English. But that movie was really inspirational to me, and I really enjoyed it. But my parents were the ones who picked it out initially, so I'm like worried that, like your movie, if you make it about that, people aren't going to want to see it because it's not a movie. Oh, I'm bored. I want to go for some entertainment. I'm not going to watch a movie about becoming a good Christian, right? Mm-hmm. So then I thought about that, and the movie Into the Wild came to mind because that's a really popular movie like nowadays, and it has a younger character, so younger people can relate to it better because they see kind of themselves and their struggles with themselves in it. So you could have a younger character who appeals to younger people, and maybe not a doctor who's accomplished and who's older and is already working as a doctor, but still an accomplished, Harvard student who's doing really well, but he's struggling with with his own morals, I guess. And you could have him go over or something. And it'd be attractive for younger people because they could relate to it more immediately, but then older people would still see the message of the movie. Mm-hmm. My parents watched Into the Wild and they liked it too. So, it's kind of goes beyond generation. And okay, I have a bunch of things. All right. Also, I think that you could relate how we usually, when we grow older, we forget what we're passionate about, and we give up our passions in order to fit into society, to get rich, to become what society expects us to be, successful and popular and famous. And as we grow old, we go back to those values. When we're retired, we can do whatever we want. But maybe just explore how that person goes back to those values of being passionate about following their heart. And also, I think the thing about portraying modern day Africa would be a lot better in the first option of the movie, because I don't know, that one just appeals to me better because I could relate to it, and I feel that a lot of students or a lot of younger people really don't know what Africa is like. We have that stereotypical kind of image of a desert, some huts, and African people running around in little skirts and with spears, right? But we really don't know what Africa is like, and we really don't have a picture of modern day Africa. So I think the first option would be better because it would allow that portrayal, and they could travel throughout it, and throughout with like this young person and their mentor traveling and experiencing, I don't know, Christ, I guess, and just learning about life and following their own heart. And in the second option, it'd just be harder to see that transformation of the individual when there's a teacher who undergoes a transformation and there are the students who kind of undergo a transformation. It's just too many people at once, and it wouldn't give that whole feeling of changing and of realizing that there's stuff to do in the world. And then also I kind of thought about how Alex said just leaving the movie kind of like unfinished, like go do something. Like when he said that, I kind of thought about how you said Livingstone died kneeling in prayer, and that kind of showed me the image of like he wasn't done. He was still praying probably for help from God to help him finish what he started, and he didn't finish. He died. So it's kind of like the unfinished feeling, and those are my thoughts. Yeah.
Very good.
I was just going to say, kind of along with the lines of Alex and JJ, that I think the one risk, biggest risk you're going to be taking is that if you call this movie, Livingstone, etc., in Africa, the problem is that to people looking in the newspaper, this is just going to be another story. And I have a story, you have a story, we all have stories. And so, essentially, I don't know right now if approaching it that way is going to have the relevance that people need. So I think this film has incredible potential, but I don't know if really people will be able to see the relevance to get them to go there first. And I think essentially what you're trying to show is that Livingstone was a disciple, and that the way he saw brokenness was in Zambia, and so that's how he modeled Christ's love with these kids and in these clinics. But for me, I don't think most of the people who see your movie aren't going to walk out of the theater and say, well, I'm going to fly to Africa. I think the underlying message needs to be that people in the modern day can still be disciples like Livingstone, but it can be in their own way they see brokenness. And the other day I was in class and one of our professors, told us, did you know 1.4 billion people in the world live off $1.25 a day? And everyone's like, oh, that's bad. And then everyone walks out and buys a $5 Frappuccino because it's hard for us to find relevance. So I think if the Christian message could be that what you leave people with is the desire to find their own brokenness and to find Livingstone stories and inspiration to just be a disciple in a different way. And I think that'll be more effective than someone just saying, this person, Livingstone, 200, at this time went and made this difference, because that's just another story, and we hear those all the time.
What would move you personally so much? If I had to ask you, what something that could happen to you? It could be a death in the family. It could be, seeing something so profound. What would move you, in your opinion, to want to change from being one type of person to another?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing for me is especially living in like Malibu and Los Angeles, we see kind of like this American dream, and I think we really value like power and money and fame and all these things. And so I think what you were saying about the doctor in New York, realizing that he's living for the wrong things. And I think if you can have people leave the theater saying, well, what am I doing in my life? Like, what is the purpose in my life? And are the things I'm chasing after like invaluable? Are these essentially going to leave me unfulfilled in the end? That would leave me saying I need to make some changes. But if I leave saying, well, this doctor, wanted to help people, so I should go help people. I really loved the idea that Alex talked about being unresolved. The part where you leave, you're not going to feel complete until you really feel that call from Christ in your life. And I think that's huge.
Okay. Yes, pass the mic down there.
Well, one of the questions that I was thinking about is
point the mic towards you. There you go.
Do you really want to tell Livingstone's story, or do you want to tell a story that's true to what he stood for? because I think like if you go with the first version of the story, when you have this guy from New York is really superficial, and then you end up with him making this transformation because of him finding out about Livingstone's life. I feel like that
and other things along that he experiences there in Africa.
Yeah.
You know?
I kind of feel like the audience is going to be told what to think if you do that, because it's kind of like the typical thing. You start with somebody who's superficial, they find out about all this really honorable stuff, and they make a change. So I don't know about that, but I think that if there's some way that you can tell more of Livingstone's story, that it would really be good, because just his true story has like all the plot points you'd ever need, you know, the whole Zambezi expedition that failed and just all of that really interesting stuff. I think that, you know, you would be really doing well to do that, but I know it's hard because you have to show present day Zambia, so that's
only for a few minutes.
Only for a few minutes.
Yeah, just for a few minutes. I mean, it can be like, let me tell you a story, and you tell the whole story, and say, how'd you like that, Charlie? Or, you know, I mean, it could almost be, I'm exaggerating, of course, but it could almost be just bookended, you know. And maybe a couple, you remember Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
And you remember how he told the story from the park bench, right?
Yeah.
And so you didn't see too much, you picture that as being modern day almost, a little bit
Right.
more perhaps, but along those lines, you know. To show modern day Zambia, all I have to do is show a couple, you know, having an omelet in the Taj Hotel for breakfast, and then talking on their cell phone or something. You know what I mean? And that kind of you mean modern day Zambia? You know, and the car picks them up and takes them to the park or something. And so I've showed whatever I need to show. You know, I'm looking for the Zambian government. The Zambian government's behind this, and they're helping us. So to get the movie made, I kind of want to show modern day Zambia to get their help. You know.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm mainly interested. My own personal feeling is that I love the Livingstone story, and I think it's a powerful story about a man that sacrificed. And so I share your feeling here, and yet I also love, you know, Dan and this gentleman. It's too far for me to read his name tag. I'm getting old, you know.
Try to pronounce it.
I like your idea about the transformation of the character as well, you know, and so that's a dilemma that we're in, and that's why we're getting your opinions. And so, please, who's next?
Is it pronounced Votek?
Go around.
Thank you.
Well,
I
I think,
get the
from my perspective, if you want to go off of the more Christian perspective and the power of his message, I think it'd be a really good idea to maybe contrast modern day Zambia with possibly another African country that's going through a lot more turmoil, because it seems from what I've heard, and I don't have an extensive knowledge of African politics or anything like that, but that a lot of the stability in Zambia today is because of his message. And so as cool as it would be to tell his story, because I'd love to see a movie where it was just this adventure story with David Livingstone. I don't think if you wanted to leave it unfinished, then that would be as powerful as if you just portrayed modern day Zambia and the passion that the people have, that ultimately stems from David Livingstone's Christian mission.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just, yeah.
Somebody hand the microphone to Susie there.
Susie's got a comment.
Were you about to say?
While it's there, go right ahead.
Step up to the mic.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So that's Peter.
Okay.
By the way, these are very helpful comments.
Yes.
Very, very helpful.
I just want to say, I think when you're portraying Livingstone's character, it's important to portray his growth as well. Because I know that when he set out, he didn't know how it was going to end up. I know that just from my experience, going on mission trips, and I'm sure most people's experiences, they're so transformed by that experience. And I think that would be incredible to see Livingstone's transformation from the beginning through the end of that. At the same time, it's so hard to portray that, because when you come back from a mission trip and you try and tell someone, what happened on it, it's easy to say, we did this and this, but it's so hard to portray how that changed you. And I think if you can nail that down, then that will help people realize that they can make a change too, and also to make it at a level that they feel like is a reality level, where you see all the things about Africa and there's so many things going on, it's like, well, what can I do? And if they feel like they can take an initial step and see that Livingstone took that first step, and then from there on out, you don't have to know how it's going to end up or how you're going to change the world. You just have to take that first step. And I think if you can portray that Livingstone did take that first step, that initial faith step, and then all of this came about because of that first step.
I'm going to be bold as well, and I'm going to say that I would spin it as thus. I think our generation is really tired of hearing of mission trips too, in an effective way to be a Christian, because our generation, I believe, is tired of meeting temporary needs all of the time now. Because, if Dr. Livingstone was really interested in that, he could have cooked food in his home and handed it out to people on the streets. But that's not what he was interested in. He was interested in a lifestyle inspired and infused in everything that he did by this Christian mission, by Christ. And so I want your film to inspire a lifestyle of change.
Give me an example of the lifestyle.
Within people. I would even possibly have somebody, a character, that questions kind of what Kay was saying, the American dream altogether. We are completely founded upon money and power, and I think we're starting to see through some of that. And our generation hasn't really come in contact with many situations of turmoil, of war. We've been free of that, thank God. But at times like this one, even now, our economy's falling apart. People in power we've seen make really bad decisions, and our foreign relation is coming into question. So many things are happening that we're saying, we are going to be the new American generation in the new country, and what is that going to look like? I think we're realizing that we have the power to change what this country can look like. And if you try to pull apart some of the pieces of our aspirations and say in that power base, in that money base, I want to be a person that goes into this world with a lifestyle of Christ, and I don't want to be ashamed of that. I want that to be something that I am proud of doing. Just as Livingstone was proud to go into the Christian mission field in Africa, into the African mission field with a Christian power within him, so to speak. He was empowered by Christ's love, and he came back, and I can just see his turmoil in entering back into reality, acceptable, modern times, and struggling with what he just learned. This is so fake. This isn't real. What I'm doing is really making a difference. Inspire people really to connect with that. I'd also say that we're also a microwave generation, and so we think in very concise thoughts, and we have ability to take vast amounts of information and channel it into statements and bullet points. And so I would really say that we would be able to see through massive amounts of information, but have a very specific point with your film, and leave it on that point, because we can carry that away. Just as you came away with quotes from these films, just the way we come away with just certain aspects of it, I would say challenge us to say, this is what we're getting across, and work the whole film toward that point. And I would also say, don't be afraid of being labeled, an indie film or something that's going to, you think, only appeal to a small group of people, because that kind of thing is really kind of catching on right now. I hear a lot of our friends saying, "Oh, well, you should check out this film. It's not, the mainstream, but I think it's a lot better than a lot of the movies that are coming out of mainstream." You have the ability to come out with this mainstream. You're obviously, hopefully, going to work on with much greater resources than, say, independent films would, and you're going to have a greater audience to affect. But just don't be afraid of throwing that mission out there, of saying, we need a lifestyle change. Just as Livingstone couldn't turn off and on when he was a Christian and doing service, and when he was back in the world, working for what? His mission was his life. And I think that's what we should be inspired to have.
Do you think it's possible that the film might accomplish that if, using the basic initial story that I was outlining here, that doctor at the end of the picture says, "The heck with New York, the heck with all this, the heck with wherever he is, I'm going to Africa."
I like that direction.
Would that help do what you think the film should do for you?
Yeah, because it helps inspire within us that we can make these changes. And what is wrong with that?
Right.
We should be inspired for that to be our goal, not to go and then come back, necessarily. Not that all of us have to flood into Africa, and stay there. But why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Well,
leave us with that question.
Presumably
If this is playing with your mind, and if you're worried about what you're working for in this life, why not?
Well, exactly. And presumably there is a scene, not to write this for you, Ben. But presumably there's a scene where someone says that exactly to him. "Why are you doing this? What are you crazy?" And he says, "Why not?"
What are you working for?
Yeah.
What are you living for? This is what I've found to be true. And our generation is striving for truth. I think that's something we could really latch onto.
I think you guys are here just to kind of hear what the students think about like your movie plot and the screenwriting so far, and just like some of the ideas that have been thrown out. I think some of them are really, really good. I think all of you guys have really good things to say. I'm just going to speak from my heart and what I've been hearing, and as a response to that, as a student and as a member of our generation, just like what originally hit me. Like, I definitely understand where Omid is coming from, that it shouldn't be this idea of let's go come back, more missions, like, because honestly I think we've all heard that and it's been beating the dead horse over and over again. Just the Christian mission means that you have to go on mission and then you go and come back and you feel good for a week and then you move on. But like I wanted to address some of the issues like as a movie. Like I know you guys gave us some storylines and some of the things you guys are thinking about. I think you can take both of your ideas. Like I know they seem really different right now, but honestly I can see it happening kind of meshed together. Like I don't know exactly if we do the whole modern day 80% and then David Livingstone 20%. I don't know if that's going to be as effectively done, just because that's almost like following two storylines of two different individuals. And I don't know if that can be really effectively done in a course of a movie. So this was just like my vision. I don't know. I don't know if you guys seen the movie Big Fish.
I was just going to mention that.
Yeah, I know like it wasn't like the best smash hit, but I actually thought it was pretty boring, just to be quite frank with you. But I think if you kind of incorporate that kind of idea, like it'll take place in modern day, and then it's this person maybe that has a tie to like somebody in the Livingstone living characters, like maybe like the grandson of so and so or whatever, and like he's old and he's ineffective and he knows it, and he's just talking to like his grandson or like somebody that like is up and coming, is going to be successful for sure. But then what are you living for? And like he just says like, I know what I say like doesn't really matter to you at this point, but let me tell you a story about a guy that's been taken by God. Like when you were telling me like how David Livingstone died, it almost gave me like an image of Enoch, and how like it's kind of like a more recent example of a man that was literally taken by God. Like his spirit was taken by the Lord because God said your job here is done. And I think the story of David Livingstone is like dramatic and inspirational enough so that we don't have to add like another story on top of that. And in fact, if we add another story that's kind of like, here's a guy that doesn't know what he's doing in life, he's really rich and successful, but then he's missing something in life, and then he gets this transformation, and so now he wants to live in Africa. It's going to be almost a little cliche, and people in our generation pick up on those things like 10 minutes into the movie, like, oh, this guy's going to end up staying in Africa. So I would say just kind of steer away from that, and those are just my ideas I'm throwing out there.
So what you're saying is you feel the Livingstone story in and of itself could carry the picture.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like if the guy that's telling the story is like,
I mean, if it's well done, and you really see the suffering and his own transformation and what he went through and what was in his head to do something like this, his motivations and everything. If you really told that properly, you feel like that even young people today would identify with a story like that.
And like somebody else threw out earlier, like I think it's also really important to recognize that David Livingstone was a person, not like this angelic holy being. Like, talk about some of the struggles. Like, maybe he dealt with like very, very, very human things like lust per se. You know, like if you add just little things like that in there that make us really identify with that human being, like as not a saint but as a human being, people can really take away from the story. Like maybe I can do that too. And like there doesn't have to be a resolution, like Alex was saying earlier, I think. Like maybe this person that's hearing the story from this older generation, like maybe it's going to be like the guy that's telling the story just asks the question. And like, what are you living for? Like, you know? And then maybe the movie doesn't end like with him going, well, I'm definitely now going to live my life in service of God, you know? Like it doesn't have to be like that. It can be like where he's still pondering, but it's the question, and like the audience needs that question asked, like
a constant struggle.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question just to put out there, and mix into your responses, which is how do you think? What sort of feelings or thoughts come up around the notion of having additional flashbacks as he's perhaps talking with the tribes about Christ, to those days?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's hokey, and I wouldn't do that. I think it was
too much.
All of a sudden we're in first century Palestine. Before we were in Africa, and before that we were
Bad
in New York.
idea. Whose idea was it?
So I think there's a lot of great talk about like all these different analogies you can have with a modern person, all these metaphors and all these things. And someone said like, don't just tell a story, but I'm kind of have to disagree with all that. I think that's exactly what you need to do, is you just need to tell his story. I think you can't underestimate the ability that people have to get it. Like, you don't have to have the point you want to make and then tell a story around that. You don't have to have your message be first and foremost. You don't have to hit us over the head with it. Like, don't insult us. Like, we can get it. Like, tell his story. And I think if you tell his story the right way, then any big transformations a modern person might have, any of these big analogies or metaphors that you could tack on, would be unnecessary. If you tell his story right, people will get it. Mm-hmm. People will understand without you having to flash it on the screen. Like we talked about Che, involved with Che. Like, I doubt like Soderbergh set out and said, we're going to bash over people's heads that you need to question authority, you need to be a revolutionary. Like, just tell his story, tell that person's story and their historical symbol of that message, so people will get it. They'll associate it. It'll click for them without you having to keep flipping the switch right in front of their face. You know. So.
Everyone's kind of touched on it, but I was talking to Stephen during the break, and one of our concerns or issues is, I think a decision has to be made if you want this to be an inspirational piece about Livingstone, or if it's going to be a call to action for a generation of kids that are looking for a place to be or a place to serve. And I think what is so unique about this picture is you're trying to bridge that gap as using Livingstone as an icon to draw people to action. But I think it's a hard thing because you've got your Invisible Children pictures where you've got a documentary and then you've got a number that flashes on the screen that says, if you want to help, call this number. And I think that's what you guys are trying to get away from, is telling Livingstone's story, but having that inspire within people to live lives in Christ. And with that also, I don't think you have to go to Africa to live out Christ's message. I think you can very well do it in your capacity as a professional or as a filmmaker or whatever your profession might be. You can find Christ in whatever life you live as long as you keep it in your mind and in your heart. So I don't know how you answer that question, is how do you bridge that gap between a documentary or an inspiring picture about Livingstone and a call to action for a generation that has been hit over the head with these call to actions.
You can't know world history from one class.
Right.
And you can't, I don't think, turn somebody into a missionary in one movie. But you can just chip away a little bit. Show them something that's magnificent and wonderful. And just put a little seed in their mind, you know. You're not going to, all of a sudden, oh, I'm going to Africa, I'm going to be a missionary.
Okay.
You're not going to get that. No matter what there's no movie made that I don't think that's going to do that. But you can make a movie where people walk out moved like I was moved when I was 17, you know, and saying, boy, I tell you, that's really, I mean, I get chills thinking about it now, even, how moved I was. Now, maybe we're not that great of filmmakers. We're not Fred Zinnemann or somebody, you know, and we don't have Orson Welles and all those wonderful people. But we can chip away. We can take a tiny piece, and we can do our best, you know, to try to inspire people. You know, we're not the greatest filmmakers in the world. We just got an idea here, and we're trying to. One thing we are doing that maybe more filmmakers should do is we have our heart in the right place, I think, to try to do something good, and we're anxious to get feedback from people that have the same sort of consciousness and the same sort of vibration, you know. So I think in that respect, you know, maybe we'll be divinely inspired in some way, hopefully. But all we can really do, to answer your question, is chip away a little bit, maybe, you know.
And with that said, I think if you do find a way to bridge this gap, and this is going to be a picture like no one's ever seen, because no one's ever tried to mesh that line, and no one's ever tried to walk that line.
Right.
And I think if you get that, then you will inspire a whole new group of kids and a whole new generation into something through a mode of entertainment. And I think that is a hybrid that you will start if you succeed in this movie.
Can I just ask a question? I'm hearing that, or am I hearing, that y'all are not, or feel like go on a mission to Africa is being beat into you, or you're trying to get it. Have I heard that? That you are kind of burned out on that message? That you should go on a... Because I'll throw out a structure. It's not a storyline, and it's not almost anything else. But what I'm hearing from you guys, and the reason I'm opening my old mouth here, is that I'm in front of more young people than I'm going to be in front of for another month or so, I assure you, and I really want to know your opinions. This is a structure that I think would allow you to say anything you want to say about people your age, about your feelings and about your values, and would allow you to bring in as much of Dr. Livingstone as is necessary in flashback form, some of it maybe by your own voices. It would also satisfy the Zambian government and leave them in a very, very good light. It would leave the end of the film as ongoing, not finished. This work will never be finished. And here it is. I'll throw it out, and then you can throw rocks at me. You all from Pepperdine are going to go over. You're financed, and you're going to go over to a mission for the summer. You pick Zambia, and you go to meet with the Zambian government. The Zambian government says, you're most needed here, you can do this here, in this area is hurting, and what have you, and you go out as a group and work in that, as missionaries, as young missionaries. Therefore, you can say in the screenplay anything you want from your young point of view. You will be going out in Livingstone's honor. That was the formation of the whole mission. This is going to be a commemorative mission for Livingstone. So you can run into situations similar to what he ran into. You can say anything you want. The story can say anything they want about Livingstone. You can have a sufficient flashbacks to be entertaining. At the end of the movie, I haven't written the end of it, but you come back and you can bring all of the values that you learned. You can apply it to the United States or somewhere else. But you've grown from your experience. We have shown Dr. Livingstone's life in its best aspects. We have shown the Zambian government in its current good light. We can say anything that's important to say about Christ and his work in a structure such as this. Is it horrible? Come on, honest, yes.
Let's let this young lady right here. You were
Yes.
going to say something?
Anybody?
Yeah,
Terrible.
in response to that too, I agree with what Paul was saying. I don't think we need the literalism as our generation. I don't think we need a modern perspective because we are the modern perspective. And I might be an anomaly at this table because I've never read the Bible. I don't associate with an organized religion. But I still care, and I would still see the movie because I care. So I don't really think we don't need to learn to care. We don't need to see this character that moves from the superficial to the caring because we know that we're too superficial already. And so I think you maybe need to draw more of a distinction between the difference between caring and what matters. Because I care about these issues, but I honestly haven't done what I could to solve them. And so I think that's really, really your focus.
Very good feedback because we want to reach a universal audience with the message. We don't want to slam it down and say, listen, let me tell you the way it is. This is the way it is, and if you don't believe this, you're going to hell. We don't want to do that. We want to come from a position of love and universal caring and humanitarianism. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Jesus, I'm not an expert, a religious teacher, but it seems to me that Jesus loved everybody. You know what I'm saying? He was with people that were not necessarily the most upstanding people of the time, and he was criticized for it. You know what I'm saying? But he says, I love everybody. Let's bring us all together. Let's unify the world here. And so I think what you're saying is exactly correct. And are you familiar with the term the collective unconscious, the collective subconscious? Carl Jung talked about it. And so what you're saying, in effect, is you want something that resonates with the collective, and the collective is we already know about superficiality, right?
And having a modern character almost allows the audience to remove themselves and see it through the lens of that character. Whereas if there wasn't that character at all, you are the only modern perspective. Where I feel as if I would compare myself more with the film if there wasn't a modern character.
There's an aesthetic distance.
What did you mean by caring versus what matters?
I mean, I care about Africa, and I think it's horrible it goes on, but I care about my grades, and I care about my family, and in the long run, we have to decide what matters.
Well, see, there's another thing. Livingstone gave up his family. You know what I'm saying? We got another guy, another question.
I just want to throw out, well, first of all...
This is terrific, by the way. This is exactly what we're looking for.
First of all.
We hope we can do this again. This is, as we progress over making the movie, this is terrific.
Cool. So...
First of all.
I wanted to talk about Livingstone real fast. His real life. As he's growing up, like in the biography version, he's 12 years old and he feels like some kind of calling, or so this is the biography. And then when he's around 20 is when he wants to go, everyone in Scotland, the popular thing is to go to China. Everyone's going to China. He wants to go to China. And I'm not sure, I'm not an expert on Livingstone, but I'm not sure why he ended up not being able to go.
There was actually a war broke out.
Yeah, that's what I wasn't sure, but so a war breaks out, and whatever turn of events, he ends up sailing to Africa, and that right there is a huge message. He didn't even end up going to the place he wanted to go to in the first place.
But he went anyway.
Yeah. He followed a calling that was so vague, I think.
Yeah.
And you could do a few things with this story. You could have a cliche like, this is Africa, and Africa needs help. And yeah, Africa needs help. The Middle East needs help. Burma needs help. There are a lot of places that need help. And so I'm just trying to come up with ideas. How can you use Zambia as an example for the collective need? Like, that's just one part of it.
From my perspective, it's minimal.
Yeah.
It's minimal.
And
I can show you a couple of shots, and you'll get it. I don't need to tell you any more than that. For me, as a filmmaker, I only needed to film one starving baby, right?
Yeah.
I filmed one boy of AIDS dying as I'm rolling. He's dying, and his mother's sobbing in his bed, and they died on camera. Yeah, and I only did that one time. 2 shots.
Yeah.
I'm changed. You know what I'm saying? So I minimize the modern day, from my perspective. Minimize the modern day, and if you tell it right, Livingstone's story would be just fine for me. And I have a couple of shots just to get you into it. Maybe a teacher's telling a class or story or something, and you go to the whole thing. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Livingstone is the Gandhi of Africa.
Yeah.
He was such a character, and we've studied him quite a bit. There's a scene where he walked up on the beach in a very remote section. Dangerous natives with poison darts are known to be in this area. Gets out of the boat and walks up on the beach. He's looking all around, right? And he's smiling. He's looking around. Doesn't see anything. Unknown to him, the natives are hiding in the bushes with blowguns, ready to shoot him with the poison darts, waiting for the chief's signal to shoot him with the poison darts. Chief never gives him the signal. Finally, the chief says, "Let's all show ourselves to him." So they all stand up, and he sees all the natives, and they all come out, and he greets them. And through an interpreter, they said, "We were going to shoot you with the poison darts." And he said, "Why didn't you?" And he said, "Because you were smiling. And it's against our faith, or it's against our religion, or whatever. It's against our custom to shoot anyone that's smiling." You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you seem like that. That tells you what a character. I mean, his story is filled with stories like that.
Yeah.
And I feel that if you tell this story well, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name, dear, but you were so inspiring in what you said about if you tell it right, people will get it. You don't have to hammer them over the head with it, So
and so intertwined with all of this, the main thing I'm trying to drive at is, let me use an example. The movie Burn After Reading. I don't know if anyone saw that. Totally weird movie with the most anticlimactical climax I've ever seen. But everything about that movie enticed me. It was so different. And they, at the end, it just ends. It ends in this CIA office. They close the folder and go, "That didn't make any sense." And the message of the movie is so profound to our society. Just how can you make a film like that? That's mainstream. That's the Coen brothers doing their thing. But just totally revamp film. Because that's what you guys get to do, and that's the coolest thing ever. But revamp it with our generation in mind, because we're really open to that, I think. And so I mean, I have a quick idea. It's probably stupid. I'll throw it out. If you did some kind of like intense research or intense kind of living among Zambian people, how much cooler would it be if instead of having an alternate, like, fictional story that's like modern day, just to quickly entice you and then throw you into the actual story you want to tell? What if you just had real-time Zambia and followed somebody's real-life story right now? Briefly, I mean, however long you want, and that runs into writing problems, because then it's actually like combining this idea of reality TV, but do like something real time, and this is the real Zambia. There's no script here. I mean, obviously you can edit out like crappy dialogue or whatever, but I just, yeah, and it would take more time, but something like that would be very unique.
And I'd also just really quickly say, don't be afraid though. You're gonna have to challenge us to tie it into today. As much as, I mean, I agree that his story is very, very powerful, but how many times have we told Christ's story? And people still don't get it. How many times we watch the History Channel about wars that are breaking out? We say that's so horrible. Let's go to war. We're still fighting each other. How many times? I mean, they all come on and they're great. They're great stories, but you have to make that connection now to challenge people to act now. And so I'd say don't be afraid of making that bridge, because his life will tell the story, but you've got to bring it to now, because people disconnect with Christ because he's not now.
And are you saying, one theme I think I'm hearing, you guys tell me, is that part of the way to make it relevant to today's audience is also to maybe be cautious of the more cliched structural things?
Absolutely.
Yeah. 100%. So to really maybe,
Say that again, Ben. I mean, I missed.
Absolutely.
I think part of what the feedback today is revealing for us is that to make it relevant to today's audience, we need to be very cautious when it comes to this sort of cliched structures or these kind of obvious scenes, obvious structural elements, obvious endings.
People want a story they haven't heard, right?
Like basically today's audience is too smart to just be.
Well, avoid formula. Have you seen Memento?
Yeah.
That movie.
Yeah.
That movie, it blows me away every time, and I can watch it over and over and never quite get it. But it's so like the way that they tell the story. I have not seen another movie like that. Still.
Okay.
Michelle,
give her the mic there.
Going off the whole connecting idea, one thing, because you guys said that he wrote novels, right? Like books about what he accomplished.
He wrote about his experiences.
His experiences. So I was thinking maybe if you use that in the movie, like use his words, like from his journals or. We plan to. And like use it and connect it with the people when they're going through things, because I think I personally would love hearing like people's actual words, because it connects, it like grabs your attention so much faster. But that's it, because I was gonna say when you guys were doing the story with the doctor, when he was like this in the scene, and when he had to start doing the actions himself to save the people, literally like his Livingston's words were going over it, almost like what Livingston was doing, like making that exact connection between his experience and what Livingston was doing would be very powerful. But
right now with our generation, like being relevant to our culture and being relevant to the way we communicate is not like optional. Like if you want us to get the message, like there has to be very, I think, intentional ways. And yes, I would agree that like his story on his own is motivating for me and for you, like when you said I would be comfortable just showing Livingston's story. And yes, I think that'd be great. And I think if you made this movie and you brought it into a classroom, then people would watch it, could be impacted. But what's going to actually move people there? I mean, essentially, as a Christian, you could say, well, read the Bible. It's going to change your life. This is, if you read this book, it'll be amazing. But what does that mean? How do you bring people to that? And I think
Tell me, how do we do that?
That's a good question. But I think really, if you have someone, and essentially the plot of a movie, mainstream America goes to films to be entertained, and they go often as a distraction. I know when I go to a movie, we're not really challenged anymore in movies to think, and I think you kind of go there, see your movie, you see your happy ending, and you leave. But what if the movie did make you think at the end, and it wasn't just when you look in the paper, you know what you're going to go see is a guy named Livingston who did a great thing, and here it is, and you leave, because no one's going to connect with that. And I think, it's a great story, but I think you just need to really emphasize the relevance to modern day. And so I don't know if it's totally off base to even say, tell Livingston's story through a completely modern day perspective. And I don't know if that's totally missing what.
No, that's very wise.
But
very
what
wise
if you had
words.
one character modern day that would honor what you really loved about Livingston, but it was something that we could connect to as humans, as people, as whatever it is. But I don't know if that would miss the message of what you're trying to send.
No, it's very good feedback. He had his hand up next.
Okay, just really quickly. I know how everybody's saying not to be like cliche, and because I think all of us kind of hate when we watch a movie and in the first 10 minutes we already know how it's going to go, what's going to happen, how it's going to end. But then again, also be careful not to skip too many parts, because people really don't know who David Livingstone was. Like, most people don't. I mean, we're kind of an exception. We're a Christian university. A lot of people are Christian and they know more about that kind of stuff. But a lot, like I bet in high school, if I asked any of my friends, none of them would know. Like I'm almost certain. So I mean, like a movie about Che Guevara, like people know who he was. He's kind of like a figure, like a well-known figure throughout history. David Livingstone isn't as well known, so just make sure not to kind of assume the audience already knows what David Livingstone was all about and what he went out to do. Just still like explain that and bring that back in. And I had one more thing, but I forgot. Yeah, so
that's good feedback. Thank you. And you had one more. We got about 6-7 minutes left on the tape, and then we probably should wrap it up.
I would say, and I know you guys are gonna slightly disagree with this, but this is not the History Channel, and this is not the Discovery Channel. This is not a documentary for invisible
Gosh,
children.
you're in the wrong room, Dan.
But and what I mean when Katie was talking about relevance, I think Christ coming to Earth is God being relevant to culture. That is God sending a human to Earth being relevant to culture so that they would finally understand, listen, I want to be in a relationship with you. That is what I see has to be done with this movie. And I'm not saying, like, this is the story you do, that's the story you do. I don't know. I'm not sold on any of the stories yet. I don't know. But I think if you decide to tell two stories, I think, A, it can't be someone old. I feel like it has to be a college student or someone younger. Because I think that would be a huge part of the film. And maybe, I don't know how this would work, but maybe some kind of spring break trip. Not a mission trip. Not a mission trip, but somehow is forced to go to Africa. I don't know. I don't know how you do that. Maybe it's his friends, just casual, not like crazy rich, not crazy poor. I don't know. Just an idea. Also, figure out a way that, if you do that, figure out a way to tell it like Memento. Figure out a way to make the viewer finish the movie and go, what in the world just happened? Like, what the heck is going on? Like, I understand and I see this connection between the service and, like, maybe the kid's life has changed, maybe it's not, I don't know. But figure out a way to kind of make people really think about the question, like, this is awesome, but what is going on? You know what I mean? So
don't make it like the alternative story of Mother Teresa. Yeah. You know, you kind of have these traditional stories, and now you've got this, no, she was really a bitch story. You know? I mean, like, honestly, like so you have like this character, David Livingstone. He was a real historical person. We've got his journals. We have his fame and fortune in Great Britain. Everybody knew him. He's probably going to be 150 years old next year, and the UK will do all kinds of stories about his life, and museums and pictures will, you know, and people there will know. Just don't, if you do what these guys are describing, just don't do that. Because he was who he was. And I don't know which story you should pick up on here and gather from these thoughts and all, but you could go very traditional. William Wilberforce, Amazing Grace, bang. Like, they did it about his life. You could do it about David Livingstone. Like, it's a good story. Eric Liddell's story, Chariots of Fire. It's a good story. There's power in that good story. If you go completely postmodern, it's not about David Livingstone anymore. Really, it's not about him, that historical man who did those things. So it's kind of finding that. I think, Jack, you had mentioned something earlier. You kind of painted a picture, and I just wanted to say too, like, I would say that's exactly, you do have to have this conversation with the invisible children people, because, like, that's exactly what they are doing. They're putting the passion that these guys are describing, they're putting it in a bottle. And, I mean, it's like I've worked with a lot of different student organizations, but like none other do I see like a whole generation galvanized across the board, Christian and non-Christian, saying, I want to go do something, I need to go do something. It's kind of captured the imagination. Some people might be getting a little bit fatigued of it, but it certainly has grabbed a hold of something. Now, it's a documentary, but they're doing things, and young people are saying, sign me up, when can I go? Hey, let's raise $100,000 this year to rebuild this school.
Is that the Invisible Children?
Invisible Children Organization, yeah.
Okay. We want to thank you so much for this opportunity. It is so valuable to us. And if you would like to do this again, if you would put your email address on here as you go out today, then we will notify you to come again, and we'll bring a screenplay back to you and let you discuss it with us, and perhaps look at a rough cut of the movie, or, I mean, we can carry this further if you're at all interested, because this is the most valuable feedback filmmakers could get. And I really want to thank you so much for coming today.
It is great.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
a lot.
Thank you guys.